There comes a moment, quiet as a held breath, when a soul decides it will no longer beg to be heard. No thunder, no grand announcement, just a gentle withdrawal of words once freely given. And in that sacred hush, something shifts. Those who once thrived on your reactions begin to stumble over your stillness, unsettled by the echo of their own voices. For your silence is not emptiness, it is presence, it is power, it is a language older than fear. And while they once stood tall in the confidence of your responses, it is your quiet now that bends their certainty into unease, turning their comfort into questions they cannot outrun. Silence is not the absence of voice. It is the presence of something deeper, something rooted and unshaken. It is the moment when you choose not to scatter your energy into places that never deserved your light. You begin to understand that not every misunderstanding needs correction, not every accusation deserves a defense, and not every noise requires your reply. In that choice, in that quiet refusal to engage, you are not shrinking, you are becoming. You are gathering pieces of yourself that were once handed out too freely, reclaiming a strength that does not need applause to exist. There was a time when your voice rushed to fill every gap, when you felt the need to explain your intentions, justify your heart, and prove your worth to those who questioned it. But silence teaches you a different rhythm. It teaches you that your value does not increase with every word you speak, and it does not decrease when you choose not to speak at all. In your quiet, you begin to hear yourself more clearly than ever before. You begin to trust the steady whisper within instead of the loud demands outside, and that trust becomes a kind of power that cannot be easily shaken. Those who once found comfort in your constant responses may not understand this transformation. They may interpret your silence as distance, as coldness, or even as defeat. But what they fail to see is that your silence is not about them, it is about you. It is about drawing a line where none existed before, about protecting a peace you fought hard to find. And in that protection, you become unfamiliar to them. You become unpredictable. The version of you they once knew, the one who reacted, explained, and engaged, no longer stands within their reach. And that is where the shift begins. Because when you stop feeding the noise turns inward. The confidence they once carried, built upon your reactions and your availability, starts to waver. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back what they tried to avoid within themselves. Questions rise where certainty once lived. Doubt replaces the comfort they had in controlling the narrative. They begin to wonder, not about you, but about themselves, about what your silence means, about what has changed, about why they no longer hold the same place in your world. This is the quiet strength of silence. It does not fight, yet it transforms. It does not shout, yet it is heard more loudly than words ever could be. In your silence, you are not losing your voice, you are refining it. You are learning that your power was never in how much you said, but in knowing when not to say anything at all. And as you stand in that stillness, grounded and whole, you realize that silence was never your weakness. It was always your becoming. Not every battle arrives with honor, and not every confrontation is worthy of your spirit. There are moments when words would only feed a fire that was never meant to warm you, only to consume you. And so, you begin to understand that absence is not avoidance, it is wisdom in motion. It is the quiet decision to step away from chaos that seeks to pull you out of your center. You are no longer drawn to every raised voice, no longer compelled to answer every misunderstanding. Instead, you choose distance, and in that distance, you discover a clarity that noise could never offer. There was a time when you believed presence meant participation, that to stand your ground required you to engage in every conflict placed before you. But growth reshapes that belief. It teaches you that some battles are designed to drain you, not define you. They are crafted in confusion, sustained by ego, and fueled by reaction. And the more you give, the more they take. So you begin to withdraw, not in fear, but in awareness. You recognize that your energy is sacred, and not every situation has earned the right to receive it. Your absence begins to speak in ways your words never could. It confuses those who expected your defense, unsettles those who relied on your reaction. They were prepared for your arguments, ready to meet your explanations, but they were never prepared for your silence. They did not anticipate the strength it takes to walk away without closure, to leave questions unanswered, to allow the story to remain unfinished in their hands. And in that unfinished space, their certainty begins to weaken. Because absence creates a void, and not everyone knows how to sit with emptiness. Where your voice once filled the air, there is now stillness, and in that stillness, they are left alone with their own thoughts. They replay conversations, search for meaning, and attempt to make sense of what they can no longer control. Your absence removes the stage they once stood on, and without an audience, their confidence begins to falter. What once felt powerful now feels uncertain, fragile under the weight of your quiet departure. But this choice is not made to provoke fear or confusion in others. It is made to preserve something within you. It is an act of self-respect, a declaration that your peace is not negotiable. You are no longer willing to trade your calm for temporary validation, nor your dignity for the sake of being understood. You accept that not everyone will comprehend your silence, and more importantly, you no longer need them to. Your absence is not an explanation, it is a boundary, clear and unwavering. And as you continue to choose yourself in this way, something within you settles. You begin to feel lighter, less entangled in the expectations and demands of others. You realize that walking away did not diminish your strength, it revealed it. For it takes far more courage to leave a battle unfinished than to stay and fight for the sake of pride. In your absence, you are not retreating, you are rising into a version of yourself that understands the true cost of unnecessary wars and chooses peace anyway. They watched you grow quiet and thought the story had ended, believed your stillness was the closing of a chapter they had already claimed to understand. In their eyes, silence meant you had run out of strength, that you had folded beneath the weight of their assumptions. They mistook your calm for defeat, your restraint for surrender. But what they could not see, what they were never meant to see, was the quiet work unfolding beneath the surface. For you were not retreating, you were repositioning. You were not giving up, you were gathering. There is a kind of power that does not announce itself, that does not arrive with noise or demand attention. It moves quietly, deliberately, shaping itself in unseen ways. And you stepped into that power the moment you chose not to react. While they were measuring strength by volume and presence, you were learning the art of patience, the discipline of stillness. You understood that not every move must be visible to be meaningful, that not every victory requires an audience to be real. Your silence became your strategy, a space where you could think clearly, feel deeply, and act wisely. They expected resistance, perhaps even confrontation. They were prepared for your words, ready to meet you in the familiar rhythm of reaction and reply. But when you offered nothing, no argument, no defense, no explanation, it disrupted their expectations. It left them standing in a moment they could not control. Because strategy does not always reveal itself in action. Sometimes it is found in what you refuse to give. And your refusal to engage was not weakness, it was intention. In that intention, you began to reclaim something that had been slowly slipping away, your control. Not control over others, but over yourself, over your time, your energy, your emotions. You stopped allowing others to dictate when you should speak, how you should respond, or what you should feel. And that shift, though quiet, was powerful. It changed the balance in ways they could sense but not understand. The version of you they had grown accustomed to was no longer accessible, and in its place stood someone steady, someone grounded, someone no longer easily moved. What they once saw as predictable became uncertain. What they once interpreted as compliance revealed itself as choice. And slowly, their confidence, once built on your reactions, began to falter. Because they had mistaken your kindness for weakness, your openness for dependency, your voice for something they could always summon. But your silence taught them otherwise. It showed them that your presence was never something they were entitled to, that your engagement was a gift, not an obligation. And in that realization, something shifts, not just within them, but within you. You begin to see yourself differently. You no longer measure your strength by how loudly you can speak or how quickly you can respond. You measure it by your ability to remain centered, to hold your peace in the face of provocation, to choose your moments with care. You understand now that strategy is not always about doing more. It is often about doing less, but with purpose. So let them misunderstand your silence if they must. Let them believe for a moment that you have surrendered. Because while they are busy interpreting your quiet, you are evolving within it. You are building a strength that does not need to prove itself, a presence that does not need to explain itself. And when the time comes, if it ever needs to, you will not speak from a place of reaction, but from a place of certainty. And that is something far more powerful than anything they ever expected. In your stillness, you were sharpening unseen power, the kind that does not announce itself with drama or flourish, but moves quietly and deliberately beneath the surface. Every moment of restraint, every pause in the conversation, every choice not to react added weight to your presence. They could not see it, not yet, because true strength is often invisible until it demands recognition. Your silence became a forge, and you were the blacksmith, hammering patience, resilience, and self-awareness into a weapon that could not be broken. It was not in your words that you found power. It was in your ability to hold yourself steady when everything around you sought to pull you apart. The people who once felt confident in your responses began to notice the space you left behind. It unsettled them in ways they could not name. Where they expected fire, they found calm. Where they anticipated argument, they encountered nothing but clarity. And in that void, they were forced to confront themselves, their own assumptions, and the fragility of the control they thought they held. Your quiet did not insult them. It did not challenge them directly. Instead, it reflected their own uncertainties back at them, and they were unprepared for the mirror you had become. For the first time, they realized that power is not always loud, and that fear can grow in the absence of predictable reaction. In these moments of stillness, you also discovered something extraordinary within yourself. You learned that your value was not tied to approval or recognition. You realized that your presence alone carried a weight that could shift the balance of a room, a conversation, or even a life. You began to trust the inner compass that had always guided you, even when others ignored or doubted it. Every act of silence became an affirmation of your independence, every pause a quiet rebellion against the chaos that sought to define you. You were no longer a participant in someone else's narrative. You were the author of your own story, writing with the ink of intention and the paper of patience. And yet, this power was not only for you, it was a lesson for those who had once underestimated you. They had counted on your reactions, relied on your explanations, and thrived in your need to justify yourself. But when you stopped giving them that currency, their certainty began to crumble. Confidence that once felt unshakable faltered in the presence of your calm. They did not know how to navigate someone who moved deliberately and quietly, someone whose strength was not measured in words but in restraint. They were confronted by a force they could not manipulate, a presence that refused to conform, and in that confrontation, fear quietly took root. Your silence became a sanctuary, not only for yourself, but also for the power it unveiled. You realized that strength does not require spectacle, that influence does not demand applause, and that resilience is often forged in solitude. Every heartbeat in those quiet moments was a testament to your control. Every breath a declaration of your self-respect. You were learning, slowly but surely, that the world could underestimate you, misunderstand you, and even fear you, and yet none of that could diminish the power you had cultivated in your stillness. You had turned absence into authority, patience into potency, and silence into a force that even the boldest confidence could not withstand. When you stopped explaining, the world around you shifted in ways that you could almost feel, but could not always see. They had grown accustomed to your explanations, to the endless patience that accompanied your attempts to clarify, justify, or defend. They counted on your voice to fill the gaps in their understanding, to validate their assumptions, and to smooth over the rough edges of their own insecurities. But when that voice fell silent, when you no longer offered reasoning or excuses, the foundation they had built on your availability began to tremble. For the first time, they were left to confront the questions they had ignored, to wrestle with the doubts they had buried under your words, and to navigate the uncertainty that they themselves had invited. In the quiet that followed, they began to notice what they had never paid attention to before. Your absence of explanation was not emptiness, it was presence, a statement in itself. Every pause, every withheld answer became a mirror reflecting back their own actions and choices. They started to wonder why you no longer felt the need to justify yourself, why you no longer engaged in battles that only served their sense of control. Your silence became a teacher they had not expected, guiding them toward introspection they might otherwise have avoided. And in that reflection, they discovered a discomfort they could not simply dismiss. It was in that discomfort that your power truly emerged. You did not need to raise your voice or defend your position, because the act of not defending it carried weight. There is a subtle authority in choosing not to participate in the chaos that seeks to define you. By stepping back, by refusing to explain yourself at every turn, you created a space in which they had to face reality without the crutch of your compliance. And as they questioned themselves, as they struggled to understand the silence, you were free to reclaim your energy, your clarity, and your sense of peace. The world that had once relied on your constant responses now found itself unsteady, forced to reckon with a version of you they could no longer manipulate. What they could not comprehend was that your silence was not about them, it was about you. It was a declaration that your life and your choices did not require validation from anyone else. You learned that your voice has value not only in what it expresses, but also in when it is withheld. The decision to stop explaining did not come from anger or spite. It came from a deep recognition of your own worth and a refusal to invest in the insecurities of others. Every moment you chose silence over explanation reinforced a truth they had long overlooked, that you are not obligated to justify your existence to anyone who does not respect it. And so, as they questioned themselves, you grew stronger. They stumbled over the absence of your words, unsure of how to navigate the spaces you no longer filled, while you moved steadily, quietly, and deliberately through your own life. Silence, once feared as passivity, became your most profound declaration of strength. You discovered that when you stop explaining, you are no longer trapped by the expectations of others. Instead, you are free to define your own path, to hold your ground in quiet authority, and to let the world reckon with a presence it cannot control. Your silence is not absence, it is awakening, both for them and for you. You chose dignity over drama, and in that choice, something remarkable happened. They were waiting for the spectacle, the argument, the flaring of emotions that had become so familiar. They expected your anger, your defense, your insistence on proving yourself right, but instead you stepped back. You held yourself with a quiet grace, a steady confidence that required no validation. And in that very act, you unsettled them. They could not comprehend that you were strong enough to rise above their attempts to provoke you, that your worth was not tied to their approval, and that your peace mattered more than their chaos. They had grown accustomed to the noise of your reactions, and when it disappeared, it created a space they could not fill. By choosing dignity, you reclaimed your power in ways they could not measure. Drama thrives on participation, and those who seek to manipulate, intimidate, or belittle rely on your engagement to validate their actions. When you refused to meet their provocations with equal fire, you disrupted the narrative they had carefully constructed. They had counted on your involvement to maintain the balance in their favor, to ensure that your energy remained at their disposal. But your silence and calm presence reminded them that you were no longer a participant in their agenda. You were no longer defined by their expectations. In the steadiness of your dignity, a quiet authority emerged. You discovered that restraint is not weakness, it is strategy. You understood that every word spoken in haste can become a chain, tying you to situations that drain rather than empower. Your silence became a declaration of self-respect, a boundary that demanded recognition without ever raising a voice. And in witnessing your composure, those who sought to destabilize you felt the shift in power. Their confidence, once inflated by your reaction, faltered when met with calm instead of confrontation. This choice required courage because it is not easy to walk away from the familiar pull of drama. It is not simple to resist the urge to defend yourself, to justify, to explain, or to retaliate. Yet every time you chose dignity over reaction, you reinforced a lesson not only for them, but also for yourself, that your worth is inherent, that your voice is powerful, and that your peace cannot be bartered for the approval of those who do not see it. You began to understand that the truest measure of strength is not in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. It is in choosing grace when chaos beckons, patience when anger rises, and silence when noise demands attention. And as they grappled with the absence of the drama they expected, you moved forward unshaken. They were left to confront the reality that your presence, your decisions, and your life could no longer be dictated by their insecurities or their attempts at control. Your dignity became a mirror reflecting their own instability, and in that reflection, fear quietly took root. You discovered that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all, and that in choosing yourself over the expectations of others, you created a space in which both your strength and their uncertainty could coexist. In that space, you were free, and they were left to reckon with a truth they had never anticipated, that your silence, your calm, and your unwavering dignity were forces greater than any noise they could create. Your calm became a mirror reflecting their insecurity, and they could not look away. They had grown so accustomed to measuring your worth by your reactions that when the reaction stopped, it left them disoriented. Your stillness was not passive, it was deliberate, a quiet force that revealed the cracks they had long ignored. In your composure, they saw the contrast between their chaos and your groundedness, and it unsettled them. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that the measure of strength is not in noise, but in the ability to remain unshaken. And in that mirror, they were confronted with a truth they could neither manipulate nor deny. Your stability exposed the instability they had tried so hard to hide. There is a strange power in calm. It does not seek to intimidate, nor does it demand attention, yet it cannot be ignored. Those who thrived on your emotional engagement began to notice the absence of easy targets, the lack of predictable responses, and the emptiness where their control had once been. Your calm became an unspoken language, one that communicated confidence without boasting and authority without aggression. They could see it reflected in your eyes, in the steady rhythm of your presence, and in the refusal to meet their attempts to provoke you. Every silent moment was a reminder that you had chosen yourself over their expectations, that your peace mattered more than their approval, and that your boundaries were no longer negotiable. The more they struggled to understand your stillness, the more your reflection unsettled them. They began to question their assumptions, replaying interactions in their minds, searching for explanations, and confronting the insecurities they had long ignored. Your calm forced them to see themselves in a way they had avoided. Where they expected reaction, they found restraint. Where they anticipated surrender, they discovered strength. Your composed presence became a mirror they could not step away from, one that reflected not only who you had become, but also who they were when stripped of their control over you. And in that reflection, their confidence, once inflated by your engagement, slowly gave way to doubt. This mirror effect is subtle but profound. It does not humiliate, it does not attack, but it forces acknowledgement. The same people who had thrived on your emotional energy now find themselves confronted with the consequences of your absence. Your calm holds a weight that their words and actions cannot diminish. It shows that power does not always need to roar. Sometimes it exists quietly, in the unwavering way you hold your ground, in the stillness of your mind, and in the refusal to be drawn into unnecessary conflicts. Your reflection does not belong to them. It belongs to you, as proof of the strength cultivated in patience and self-awareness. And as they struggle within the mirror you have held up, you continue forward, unshaken and steady. They are left to wrestle with the insecurities your calm has illuminated, while you move through life with clarity, purpose, and quiet authority. In every situation, your composed presence is a lesson, a reminder that true strength is not in reaction, but in self-mastery. They may fear what they cannot control, but you have nothing to fear, for your calm has become a force they can neither break nor manipulate. Your lack of reaction forces them to reckon with themselves in a way that words never could. They are left to confront the emptiness you leave behind, the absence of the predictable answers they relied on. Your silence becomes a mirror in which they see not you, but their own uncertainty, their own reliance on your engagement to validate their importance. And as the reflection sharpens, the fear grows. They realize that their dominance was never true. It was borrowed, dependent, and fragile. Meanwhile, you discover the freedom that comes from refusing to react. You move through life with a clarity that is undisturbed by the chaos of those who once tried to control you. You no longer expend energy on explaining yourself, justifying your choices, or defending your peace. In place of reaction, there is presence. In place of confrontation, there is stillness. And in that stillness, you find a power they cannot comprehend, a power that does not need validation, applause, or acknowledgement to exist. Your authority is internal, unshakable, and impervious to their fear. The beauty of this transformation is that it is invisible to anyone who measures strength by noise or display. What they once thought they could dominate, what they once thought could be moved or manipulated, has become untouchable. And while they may tremble in the shadow of your quiet, you continue forward, grounded in yourself. Their fear is not your concern, it is a reflection of the truth they have been forced to confront. That power does not always shout, and dominance does not always command. Sometimes true power resides in the decision to remain still, to withhold reaction, and to allow the world to reckon with the strength of a soul who no longer participates in its games. Your silence has become your might, and in it, they discover the fear that their control can never overcome.